All right. Welcome to the first of the recorded lectures that I'm going to be doing from time to time. I'm going to kind of mix these in so that we can do new content during asynchronous learning. You're going to be watching this. It won't be that long, and this stuff is not that hard. And then you're going to be doing a little check for understanding activity that is under the asynchronous. It's in the asynchronous spot on Unit 1, Day 3. Okay, so this shouldn't take all that long. You should have your copy of the notes by you so that you can annotate or whatever it is you're doing. Okay. Going along with we're talking about research in psychology, and for our purposes, there are three different types of research that we can do. We have descriptive research, we have correlational research, and we have experimental research. All of them tell us something different, and they kind of get more and more detailed as we go through them. So today we're going to talk kind of about the most basic of them, which is descriptive research. Descriptive research is exactly what it sounds like. It is research that simply describes what the researcher is observing and recording. Okay, it doesn't tell us why, it doesn't give us insight into behavior. It is simply a descriptor, and they use it as sort of the stepping stone to build theories. Okay, so a lot of psychological research and experiments, correlational research has come out of descriptive research that has been done. There are three types of descriptive research. There are case studies, there are naturalistic observations, and there are surveys. Okay, so I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. They're not particularly hard. I'll give you some examples and whatnot. They are all vocabulary terms, so if you need real life examples, here you go. If you have questions during this, just pause it, and I will be sitting on the Zoom call for anybody who needs help. So the first type of descriptive research, the most basic type, is what is called a case study. A case study is when a psychologist observes and studies one case or one person or one situation in depth. Okay. The reason for doing this is a lot of times by studying one person in depth, it can lead to information just about humans that can reveal things that are true about all of us. And they might be doing it on somebody like Phineas Gage down here in the corner, where it wouldn't be ethical to go in and cut those neural connections in his brain to see what happens. But it is okay to study them if something happened naturally or by accident. It is ethical to say, hey, can we look at this to see what we can understand about human behavior from this accident? A lot of times, this helps to introduce new areas of research as well. Okay, so like Phineas Gage, that was kind of the first time that we really saw the connection between brain and behavior. Okay, or if you look down in the left corner, some of you may know who that is. That's the serial killer Edmund Kemper. Right, he was sort of the first serial killer to come out and be open to be interviewed by the FBI. And the stuff that he told the FBI agents, this is what the show Mindhunter is based on, the stuff that he told the FBI agents is what they based a lot of their theoretical approach for profiling serial killers on. Some of the weaknesses of this, though, sometimes the person might be atypical. It's not generalizable to the public. For instance, if you're looking at school shootings, and let's say that you're studying Parkland, and you can't say, you say, all right, whatever the guy's name is, Nicholas Cruz, I think, he did this, so this must be what all school shooters do. You can't necessarily generalize that information, okay, because all of them are different. Sometimes people that they're studying can exaggerate, such as Edmund Kemper did that a little bit. Charles Manson did it. Anytime anybody is being directly interviewed, there is a tendency for them to lie about things. And then also, a lot of times it's up to the researcher's interpretation to go in whatever direction they want to go. Okay, but the good thing about case studies is they helped us to develop hypotheses about human behavior. Um, Good example of one of these, a very, very famous one that some of you have probably heard of, case of Jeannie Wiley, girl who was locked in a room by herself for 10 years. She was chained to a potty training toilet. When she was found, she was 13 years old, but about the size of a 6-year-old. She didn't know how to speak. She kind of walked like an animal. She's what was referred to now as a feral child. And through the study of Jeannie Wiley, and obviously they couldn't do that ethically, but once they found her, they could research on her. She helped them help psychologists develop a lot of what we now understand about childhood development. Most importantly, the development of language and how we develop language, and how if we don't start developing language by a certain age, the ability to develop it goes away. So you can go ahead and watch that on your own. It's about 12 minutes long. I also linked the original documentary at the bottom. That's about 55 minutes. And then also here I mentioned Edmund Kemper. It's the co-ed killer, murdered 10 people, 1964 to 1973. And his interviews, he was very, very honest, sometimes exaggerated, but very honest with the FBI. He's a pure sociopath. But his interviews really is what gave them insight into developing how to profile serial killers. So this interview is about 13 minutes long. I will tell you it is relatively disturbing at times. So I'm just giving a little warning there. All right. So case studies looking in depth at a person or a group. Another famous one, Road to Jonestown, another one. Okay. All right. The next type of descriptive research is what is called a naturalistic observation. This is exactly what it sounds like. Right? A lot of time when we're researching, if we have a theory about human behavior, we want to try to see that human behavior in as natural an environment as possible. And that's what this is. Psychologists just going and trying to observe people interact naturally with no manipulation at all. Again, all they can do is describe behavior, not explain it, but there's no manipulation here. There's no control. For instance, if you wanted to study how males and females interacted at a bar on a Saturday night, you could just go sit at the bar, act like you're taking, sit there kind of quietly and just kind of take notes with nobody noticing you. The problem with this is if somebody knows that they are being watched, their behavior changes drastically. It's what's called the Hawthorne effect. I doubt you'd be asked about that, but it's interesting. And just think about those of you who have been at Ardrey Kell like last year when Mr. Switzer or one of the assistant principals would come in to observe a teacher. What happens to teachers' behavior? Okay, they start asking more questions. They maybe get more serious. They get all red. They get all nervous, depending on how new of a teacher they are. Okay, so you really need to make sure that this is natural. Another good example of this, famous one, Jane Goodall with chimpanzees. Okay, so That's pretty straightforward, I would think. And then lastly, one that you all are very familiar with, surveys. Now, surveys are fall into both descriptive and correlational, because I'll explain later when we go over correlation. But a survey is a way to obtain self-reported attitudes about something, whether it is your feelings about President Trump or your feelings about how good the cafeteria food is at Ardrey Kell, or really anything. You all know what a survey is. The good thing about them is they're quick and easy, but they're less in depth. They also, one of the problems is people will, if they get them in the mail, if they get phone calls, they a lot of times don't do them. Two, the thing with a survey though is we have to make sure that it is a legitimate survey. Okay. What that means is you have to choose. I'm going to get more into this on the next slide, but you have to figure out what group you want to study. And then from that group, we have to make sure that the sample that is taken is random. All right. If you choose, if asking, again, I go back to what I said the other day, if you want to do a survey about political attitudes towards the president, but the only people that you interview are in Mobile, Alabama, between the age of 50 and 70, that's not going to give you an accurate representation of the country's view of the president. So a couple of terms that you need to know, and you should probably know some of these already. So the population, I'm going to I need to rearrange these. Population of a survey is everybody that the results will be generalized to. So let's say that we want to do a survey of let's say of of Ardrey Kell's opinion of our new principal, Mrs. Brooks. Okay, the population that would be being studied is the student body of Ardrey Kell. But we might not want to survey 3,500 people. That's a lot of surveying to do. All right, so what we have to do then is we have to go through the process of sampling to get subjects to participate in the survey. Okay, when we sample, right, when we're sampling, the group of subjects is called the sample size or the sample. Our goal is for this sample to be generalizable, all right, to be representative of the larger population of Ardrey Kell. So you don't want it to just be all white kids, all black kids, all Indian kids. Okay, that would not be representative of the larger population. You don't want it to be all seniors, all freshmen. You can't necessarily generalize that. To make sure that that happens, we have to take what's called a random sample. All right. When a sample is random, what that means is that every member of the population has an equal chance of being included in the survey. Okay, so if they only gave it to senior homerooms and then they chose people from those senior homerooms, that would not be random because not everybody has an equal chance. Every student at the school would need to have an equal chance. So to give a visual representation, okay, population, Ardrey Kell, sample, the subjects that are given the survey. A couple different ways of doing this. We don't need to get that in depth on it. A simple random sample is one where, let's say that we just took every single student ID in the school and used a random number generator and we generated 500 student IDs, which would be a pretty good sample size. That's a simple random sample where everybody just has an equal chance right there. Another type of sampling is what's called a stratified sample. That would be where you put each group within the population. So we can say white students, black students, Indian students, East Asian students, Hispanic students, and you look at the proportion of the school that they make up. And then from that group, you take an equal proportion for the sample. All right, that is what's called a stratified sample, where we really want to make sure that it represents the population. Both of these, if when you're giving just a sample to a full population, it's tough. It's really, really hard to get these, and even more so when we get into like experimentation. Okay. Oh, I meant to take that out. All right. So actually meant to take that out too. Some of the limitations of surveys is one of the things what's called wording effects. The wording of a question can greatly affect the responses. Right here is something that I've done with my classes for the past couple years, where I asked A Day, would you say that industry contributes more or less to pollution than traffic? 62% said industry. I asked B Day, would you say that traffic contributes more or less to air pollution than industry? It was flipped. All because these two words were flipped. Okay, so you can see how big of an effect that can have. When you're looking at any sort of like political survey, you really need to look and see what the questions were worded like, because they can really skew one way or the other depending on the wording. The other limitation is their self-report. So people a lot of times just lie. Okay, so you can watch, these are both from Jimmy Kimmel. I'm sure you've seen this before. This one right here, people being surveyed about whether they think Hillary Clinton should be impeached, which is impossible because she was never president. But you can see how people can lie, people can make stuff up on these. And the last thing, I'm under 20 minutes. Why do we have to sample? Why do we have to sample and try to get legitimate surveys? I guess I had to figure out what's called the false consensus effect. If we don't get a random sample, let's say that you like a certain movie and you ask all of your friends and they say that they like it too. And you get to the conclusion of, wow, everybody must love that movie. The problem with that is it's not random. You and all your friends kind of have something in common. And so when we do something like that, we tend to overestimate the extent to which people share our beliefs. It's a idea of a false consensus, okay? A false idea that everybody's on the same page. Think about a political rally. Go to a political rally, everybody's cheering for the person, woo, okay? And the politician comes away saying, wow, they must all love me, okay? The problem with that is if you're at a political rally, you're probably there because you like the person. Okay, that's not a random sample. All right, so that is all I have here. You can watch this as many times as you want. Go ahead and go to the Check for Understanding Descriptive Research. Probably only take you about 10 minutes or so. Maybe all you're doing is figuring out which type of research would be best. Okay, and if you need me, I will be in the Zoom call. All right, and if you don't, have a good weekend or hope you had a good Monday.